I teach a lot of middle school and a lot of high school.
Great.
And I see a lot of kids just doodling. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, doodling like just kind of passing time and maybe kind of trying to hone their craft.
Hmm.
Were you a doodler in school and it just kind of said, hey, Matt, stop doodling and do something with your life?
Absolutely. I mean, all of my notebooks were all doodles. And even into adulthood, my last office job before I became an illustrator, I actually got called into my boss's office once for doodling during meetings. And I told her that's how I listen, how I concentrate, which it was true, actually. I could listen, but I was also drawing all the time.
One time I went into a job interview and they said it was for public relations. And they said, so how do you get your ideas? And I said, mainly in my dreams.
Yeah.
And I didn't get that job, shockingly.
Oh, that's a good line though.
It,
Yeah.
but
Time for a nap. Yeah.
that is where I get my dreams. So where does your creativity come from? Since you've always been doodling, is there a source? Is it from your dreams and you just manifested them?
No, it's not really from dreams. I think it's from just a stew of interests of my whole life, where just something that it could be a book, it could be music, it could be a movie, it could be art, things that I really loved always just I just really loved it, so it just went into the pool of inspiration. So I can look at my books and say, well, that kind of comes from there and that kind of comes from there. But it all is just I've taken all this stuff in and it's on the permanent back burner, just bubbling along, and then something will come up and grab the attention, and that's where I'll just focus on. But it comes from all different sources, really.
So was your subject matter always the same? Like even when you were a kid, you were illustrating things that would be good for children's literature?
When I was a kid, I was drawing, comic strips and things like that. So like Spider-Man, and I had like a detective comic strip I was doing for fun because I was really obsessed with Charles Schultz. So that's what I kind of wanted to do. But I had all kinds of different interests. I was making movies, I was building puppets. So I didn't, I wanted to do something creative, but I didn't know exactly that it would be cartooning or illustration until much later.
And how did you finally make I'll call it the break or the segue from doodling on your notebooks to, you know what, this could be a life for me. I could make a living doing this.
Well, that actually goes back to I was pretty young. I mean, so like when I was reading Peanuts, Charlie Brown comic books in the Sunday newspaper, I was pretty young when I noticed there was a little name at the bottom right corner, Schultz,
Yeah.
and found out there was a guy named Charles Schultz, and his job was to make up stories about Charlie Brown and Snoopy and draw. And I remember thinking, well, that's a great job. So I was aware of the people behind things. I loved Star Wars when it came out, but my dad was into movies, so I learned a lot about special effects. So I knew there
Yeah.
were people making those things, and Jim Henson was a huge inspiration for me. I wanted to work for the Muppets, and so I was always interested in how things were done. So I definitely, you hear sometimes people say, well, I don't know, it's magic. I don't know where it came from. I was not that kid. I was always like, well, someone's making this. How is that happening? So I was, creativity, a creative job is what I wanted. But it bounced around to what it was going to be. It took a while to get to that.
My background is not too dissimilar, minus all the writing and stuff. I always want to do something creative and not where it was always the same, but I'm to an extent I'm still searching for my groove. And I just kind of found that in education. So
Yeah.
your books are for all gamut of elementary, young elementary, picture books.
Mhm.
Your latest is a picture book. And I want to talk about the difference between a picture book and an illustrated book, because
Mhm.
that always kind of throws me off a little bit.
Yeah.
The difference between that and the genres you write for, and is there one that you're more comfortable with? Because you write for anything high school and below.
Yeah. No, I don't think it's one I'm more comfortable with. Because again, I'm following my interest. So the story well, this will be a great graphic novel, or this will be a perfect early chapter book, or the story kind of dictates what it's the form it's going to be. And I'm interested in all these different forms of books. So it made sense to me to jump around. I don't know if it makes sense career wise to not just stick in one thing, but I like, I let the subject, the story kind of dictate what it was. That said, I do think that picture books are the most difficult thing to do. And picture books are what I started out wanting to do, wanting to be a picture book illustrator. And a picture book is still, I think, the most difficult book to write and to illustrate.
Picture book, illustrated book. What's the difference? It's a nuance, and I always just call them all illustrated books, but there is a
Yeah.
difference. What is
Well,
it?
there is a so in its purest sense, like a picture book, it is the words and the pictures working together. The words will get you this point, and then the pictures take you there, and the whole thing kind of goes around because the audience of a picture book, some of them they haven't learned to read yet, so they're looking at the pictures, they're listening to the words, and all that should work together. You shouldn't be the text, the words shouldn't be a direct what then you see what directly is drawn in a picture book. You have room to work in between the lines to take the next moment. An illustrated book, in a sense where it's a lot of prose and then you pop in for a what they call a spot or something, every once in a while. That has a different function. Where, say, in a chapter book, if I have a text with two characters talking, I won't illustrate them talking. I may illustrate the moment after they finish talking, where what they just said
Okay.
is sinking in. So
The
it's these
reaction,
little,
basically.
yeah, it's these little extra things. Again, you don't really ever want to be drawing exactly what's in the words because why the words are there, and you want to be adding something. A picture book, there's much more of a 50-50, I think, between the words and the pictures. And an illustrated book, it's you're popping in to hit certain accents, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. For me, a good illustrated book or picture book is one that has a nice, good give and take between dialogue and story. So that
Hmm.
way, if you're the guest reader or you're the teacher for that day, you can really kind of get into the character if you're that kind of teacher or
Yeah.
reader. It also allows you the chance to stretch the story out or to truncate it if you're short on time.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. My background, like when I went to college, I didn't go to art school. I studied theater and film. So the idea of reading it aloud, and for his picture books, they're kind of mostly read aloud. So that idea of the rhythm and the cadence and how it'd be read is something I always think about. And even when I'm doing my sort of early chapter books, which are first, second, third grade, Plum stories I've written, I always read them out loud because I want that cadence to be okay and be able to be read well.
When you were writing the Plum series, was there a motivation behind it? Like you wanted to write for yourself as a young kid, or a lesson you saw?
Well, I think to an extent, I'm always writing for myself. I'm writing books that I would have wanted to read then and kind of still want to read now. The Plum books, I really wanted to have that sort of early chapter book. I wanted them to be funny and short and fast. I was very influenced by James Howe and the Bunnicula books and things like that.
Yeah.
But I also wanted them to have a real emotional reality to it, a real emotional weight if I could. They're funny, but the characters really care for each other and they're all, about kindness. But I also wanted them to be funny. I also, again, going back to like my love of Jim Henson, I've always wanted a bunch of characters, like the Muppet Show, so Plum was kind of my chance to have a cast that I could then, by the second book, well, what happens if I put Plum with, Meg or Meg with Itch, and that kind of stuff. And that was a lot of fun for me.
I recently reread Winnie the Pooh for the 100th anniversary, and
Fantastic.
those books did such a great job in introducing a character once and then having them reappear
Yeah.
a couple
They're
stories later.
they're in the Hundred Acre Wood. They're doing stuff. They're
Yeah,
there all the time. And then Ernest Shepard, those illustrations, he's just an absolute master. Probably my
yeah.
favorite, definitely my favorite of the Golden Age illustrators.
I also like, what's his name? Blake. He did the illustrations
Quentin.
for Quentin Blake. Yes,
Yeah.
his
Same thing,
illustrations.
yeah. He just, again, for those chapter books, but he knows just when to come in. They're very funny, but they just, Quentin Blake has just like a life that jumps from his drawings.
Yeah.
And it comes from him, he's just got the pen and the ink and he's trying it out. And if it doesn't work, he tries another one. So it's just like, it's all about the spontaneity of the drawing, the line.
When you're drawing, is it easy for you? Does it come kind of naturally?
No, no. Drawing's hard. And it doesn't come naturally to me. It's for me, again, kind of going back to Quentin Blake, I'm always trying to keep alive, and a lot of illustrators are trying to keep alive the life that's in your sketches. When you're doing a sketch, it just has this great kind of energy.
Yeah.
And then you get approved and changes and blah blah. And then by the time you get to the final, it's the big challenge is keeping the life to the final. And I've been, working on that for 20 years. And it's there's I've come at this point to have a little bit of confidence to go with the Quentin Blake idea and just draw it and then hope, if it doesn't work, try something else. Bartleby is a good example of that, where it's sketch drawings, but the actual art that you see in the book is a brush pen. So I know what I'm going to draw, and it's you either get it or you don't. It's that sort of, which is, a tradition of, Asian art and things like that, where it's you get it or you don't, which is one of the reasons I don't work digitally very much. I've done digital stuff, but I prefer working with actual pens and brushes and stuff like that because there's no control alt Z. It's like you get it or you don't.
I hate to sound so naive, but a brush pen,
Yeah.
to non-artists, what is that? It's like you're meant to like cheesecake, two things that don't go together.
It is a pen. The ones I use are refillable, which is nice, and they have a soft brush point.
Oh,
So you can use them like a brush where, uh, if it's a sort of a fixed pointy pen, that's got a certain kind of line. In this case, a variety of lines. You get very thin lines, you could get very thick lines, or what I like to do is called dry brush, where you kind of push it in and you rub it against the paper, and the paper has a little bit of texture to it. You get
does it
this
run like watercolor, kind of bleed into the paper just a bit?
a little bit, yeah. I mean, you definitely have to let it dry. I let it dry a whole day before I paint over it. It's waterproof when it's dry, but it takes a while to dry because it really is ink.
And then you paint on top of it, correct?
Yeah. So
For
I'll
your
do the
stuff.
inking and then I'll do the painting. And, as I go on, and get Bartleby's another good example of this, I use as big a brush as I can find because if I use a little brush, I'd be kind of, with a big brush, you make your mark. And
Yeah.
that's what I kind of like. I like the idea of you can see um, the mark of the brush. You can see, it's just I've worked it all out and now I'm going to do it. And let's hope it works. But a big brush really helps with that.
About Bartleby, when our kids were growing up, I told them that in elementary school, you're trying to fit in with the crowd to an extent
Hmm.
because they said, well, what's it like? And then outside of elementary school, you can be who you want to be. And that there was, and not that I was trying to force my kids to be any certain way. I was just trying to roughly explain to them what I've seen in elementary school. However, in Bartleby, it's about a kid being himself, eh?
Yes. Yeah. Bartleby knows who he is. He knows what he prefers not to do. And you assume he knows he does prefer to do certain things. Like his clothes are very particular.
They
And in
are.
my
They're,
mind, he wears that every day. That's what he wears every day. He
it's very
prefers.
Alex P. Keaton.
Yeah, he's dressed up. It's he's got his tie on and stuff like that. He's a little proper, but he digs it. That's what he likes to wear. Um, and yeah, it is a book a little bit about someone he's very comfortable. He's not upset saying, I prefer not to. But it does have an effect. And in the book, it affects the children around him and the teacher, and then also Bartleby too. He doesn't want to be apart from the class,
Hmm.
but at the same time, he knows what he wants to do and stuff like that. So how can he find a way to be part of the class in a way that he's comfortable with?
When you were creating this, what came first? The idea for the concept of how Bartleby acts and thinks, or
Mhm.
the character, and it morphed around him?
Well, it was when I was in college, I had an early American literature class, and my favorite story I read in that class was Bartleby the Scrivener by Herman Melville. It was about this office worker who, whenever the boss says, do this, he just says, I would prefer not to. Yeah, it says, I would. And they don't know what to do with him. It's a very dark story, really, but I just was fascinated by the story, and it stuck with me for years and years. Kind of like I was saying, that stew of influences is always there. And then I was sort of playing around with an idea of a kid who says no all the time. And I thought about Bartleby, because saying I prefer not to is different than saying no. It's a different thing. And in the original Melville story, it's off putting. They don't know what to do with him. And I thought that'd be kind of interesting to explore in sort of a preschool kind of setting. So he became Bartleby. And then it was funny at first, that's funny. But then I had to figure out like what's really going on with this kid and like how would that affect everybody else? Which led to, some really interesting thoughts and wonderful conversations with my editor and art director about what's Bartleby really thinking.
To that, on the production side of a book, how much do they steer you in the correct way? I mean, not to throw editors any shade or anything, but what is their job in your world when you're creating a book?
Well, I think an editor, a very good editor, their job, what they're trying to do is make the best book that get the circumstances to make the best version of the book you want to make. They're taking what you're trying to get out and helping you get that out. So they're not saying, you know what, it'd be great if Bartleby, had said something else or blah, blah. They're like, this is the story. What can we do to kind of make that as strong as possible, as clear as possible? So it's very, I mean, it's a very difficult job, an editor, to do, to kind of work with an author. And when you get a good editor, it's just a wonderful back and forth conversation. And I've worked with wonderful editors when I started writing. And art directing is the same way. The art director is trying to see what you do and get you to do the best version of what it's possible for you to do.
Hmm.
And a lot of it is just having, it's just having faith and confidence in you, which once you realize that is very, it's a wonderful thing to have. Just sort of just the confidence that, well, they really think I can do this. And then, that helps you go ahead and do it to the best of your ability.
Now, because you've written chapter books, early chapter books, graphic novels, and picture books, how do you know from the get-go what it's going to be? Like in Bartleby's first incarnation, you knew it was a picture book and not a graphic novel?
Yes. Yeah. So the idea will come and almost immediately I know what it's going to be. That's not something, I never thought well, Bartleby could be a graphic novel. It was definitely a picture book. And because of that, I thought about the page turn and what I can do with I call silent spreads. People say wordless, but I think that's kind of denotes you forgot to put the words in. So it's silent. And a graphic novel, I know that's going to be a little bit more involved and things like that and so on and so forth. So by the time I have the idea what it is comes actually that's not a very hard decision to make. That's pretty clear, I think, to
Hmm.
me. Yeah.
You also teach writing at the collegiate level, yes?
Yes, I teach at the Vermont College of Fine Arts, an MFA program of writing for children and young adults.
I've taught elementary school, middle school, high school. Um, I always focus on reading and the love of reading. What can people do to get kids to read more, to where it's not perceived as torture or something arduous they don't want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I'm no expert in it, but it seems to me it really comes down to the right book for the right kid, which I think all, good librarians and teachers are capable. It's like, you should check this out. And it really just, I wasn't a big reader. When I was a kid, I read those Charles Schultz Peanuts book, and I read books about making movies, but I wasn't reading
Yeah.
Roald Dahl and that sort of stuff. That came later. I became a reader like in high school, really, and then went on. And it was just sort of a matter of getting a book where you're like, oh, this is interesting. So I think it's really just a matter of getting the right book in the right hands of the kids. There's so many wonderful books. Um, the past, yeah, but even also the last 30 years or so, that you can find the right book for each kid, I think.
Yeah. I always start out with comic books. Because
Yeah.
I if it was a book, I mean, I've got these all around me now, but books and stuff, I was always very adverse to them. But
Hmm.
comic books, I would get in all day, and graphic novels too.
Yeah, you didn't think, it's funny when my first graphic novel came out, it came out in 2009, a long time ago. And it had been out for a while, and I heard from some librarians, they said, "Oh, this is really good for reluctant readers." And I never heard that phrase before at that point. And I was like, "Oh, well, that's great." Because that's, if you think, "Okay, I can do this," but, with that book especially, starting out, I wanted it to be, have the heft of a novel, but it's a graphic novel,
Yeah.
But I think that's wonderful. I mean, whatever can get you to say, I'm interested and I think I can do it. Because yeah, the idea of I don't think I can read this book, how paralyzing is that? And there's some books that are intimidating. A 700-page Harry Potter book might be intimidating for a kid.
Yeah, it is. I worked at an elementary school one time, and they had a very large graphic novel section, manga section.
Mhm.
But the librarian was always a little bit too strict, in my opinion. She was like, "You gotta if you're gonna get a graphic novel, you got to get something else too.
Get a real book.
Got to get
Yeah.
a real book." Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
like,
Uh,
just let the kids get whatever they want to. Buy more graphics. But
Yeah, I was always, when I started out, I was just like I wanted the graphic novels to be just shelved with the fiction books.
yeah,
Like even that it was I mean, I understood that like a graphic novel section was good, but at the beginning, like when I was starting out, there wasn't that many. There was, Store in the Barn and Smile and American Born Chinese. There wasn't a
maybe
whole lot of them. So
Moss,
I'm like, we'll
maybe.
just
Yeah,
put them with everything else.
yeah. Like why we teach in high school mouse is beyond me, but we do.
Hmm. Yeah.
Just one of those things. Matt Phelan, where can people find you if they want to dig more into your art or what your man shed? We were talking before we started recording. Your shed is amazing.
My shed
I
is nice. Yeah.
I'd say go to his website just to check out the shed
Yes.
because every person needs it, be it a
You can
man or a woman,
You
whatever.
can, yeah, if you have a little bit of a yard, you can get one. Yeah, so my website is mattphelan.com. I try to update it. I'm going to redo it. I'm also on Instagram as Matt Phelan Draws, and a little bit on maybe Facebook, I guess. I'm not very good at the social media. I do try to do things on the Instagram, but
I am
do
the
what I can.
same. Any YouTube presence? Can people check you there?
I do have a YouTube channel. It is also Matt Phelan Draws, and there is some fun stuff up there. I used to make my own trailers for my graphic novels, and there's some videos of me drawing, and I do mean to make some more stuff for that this year. I just bought myself a nice sound recorder, so I'm gonna tap back
Nice.
into my film school background and try to make some videos.
Editing is a yeoman's work, isn't it, Matt? So, Matt, latest book is Bartleby. Give us a synopsis for those of us who don't know what it's about. Bartleby is
Bartleby is a story of a little polar bear named Bartleby who, instead of saying no, says, I prefer not to. And the story shows how that affects the people around him, his fellow classmates, his teacher, and Bartleby himself, and how he can find a way to still be a part of the group and still remain true to himself.
final question, Matt. Why a polar bear and not some other animal? Was a polar bear to you funnier or easier to draw, or it was just in your wheelhouse?
No, I mean I do love drawing bears, and I have definitely a bunch of bears in my repertoire of books. But there are two reasons. One, the whole look of Bartleby is based on a stop sign: red, white, black. And the
Like the
white bear
tie.
worked for that. Works, yeah, the tie, which is actually his costume is from Laurel and Hardy, but that's what that is. But the colors are a stop sign. And when I thought about a polar bear, it just made sense because we all have that sad image of a polar bear on a little ice floe by himself. They're more solitary bear than other bears, so it seemed to make sense.
Very true. I was reminded of a classic children's song, Matt. That's why I laugh. Anyway.
Oh, what song?
Uh it
Oh, in it.
wasn't Key and Peele. That's the comedy. That's not that. It was a Kidlet album from I think 2009, and it was called The Bear Song.
Oh, all right.
I'm gonna find it and
No,
send
it's
it to
it's
you.
gonna be on your head. You send it to me.
I will do that. Actually, I'll find it in just a moment. Matt, thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to checking out the book.
Thank you very much, Trey. It's been great talking to you.